Hi, welcome to the small shed. Today in the shed we're building a small spinning wheel for a parent-teacher association. See you in a minute. Now, we had an odd request in the other day in the Menin sheds for one of these wheels that spins round with little pins on it that stops it at a certain position for fates and things like that. They'd had one, but it's obviously past its useful lifetime now. They wanted us to make another one. Something I've never come across before really, so I don't quite know where we're going. I've got a piece of the recycled plywood that we use so much in the shed, the stuff that I went and got from Birmingham. I think by the time it's sanded down and a circle's cut out of it, it should be easy enough. And I think the simplest way would be to just mark out centre, put the circle cutter on it with the router jig and cut the circle, stick a nail through it and stick it in a post and it should spin round. But that's not the way we do things, is it? I'm not sure really. It would probably work perfectly well, but my immediate thought was that it needed some sort of a bearing in the middle, and it just so happens that in the garage somewhere I've got a whole load of bearings that I took out of the front wheels and the rear wheels of the cycle cart to put bigger ones in for different sized axles. So I think I've got some bearings that might suit. I've got to find a suitable bit of metal to act as a spinning, as an axle to go for the bearing to go onto, and we've got to obviously fit the bearing into the plywood, which I think should work okay, but we need to sort of do this thing stage at a time. So first of all I'm going to go in the garage and see what bits we've got. Right, so first off are bearings, and in one of these boxes up here, that's the ones. These are all bearings that are no longer any use, because obviously the axle sizes are much bigger. So I've got that and a slightly smaller one. I think they've both got the same size axle. I've got some stock metal here that I can also use. Yeah, that will fit on there fine. So I can use either that or that as the axle. Got the bearing. Let's go and knock my holes out and see if we've got a Forstner bit that'll fit either of those sizes. Now I've got two Forstner bits which are close but not quite right, but they're the only bits I've got that are big enough for either of those. Just drilled a couple of holes in a bit of scrap, and both of them are slightly undersized. Now the problem is that if I drill that hole first, or if I use the circle cutter first, sorry, I'll have a small hole to make that work, cut the circle out, and then if I drill this one, it's quite hard to drill a hole like that with a Forstner bit when there's already a hole there, because it'll just wander all over the place. So I need to be doing this hole first and widen it out, and that leaves the problem of how the circle jig will work. But I think there may be a solution in the circle cutting jig itself. If I can get that. There is a bush, if I remember right, that is used for I don't know what. I've never used it before actually. It fits in there. But it so happens that it's the same size as that bearing, so that will dictate that I'm going to use that bearing. I'll drill the hole that size first, open it out with the file, drop the bush in, and then that gives me a pivot for the circle jig, which will be dead in the middle of the wood, and then I can run my circle in after that. So I think we've got a way forward. So we'll just roughly find the middle of the timber. And we'll just open that out. It's almost there but not quite. So we'll file that out. Right, that's got it pretty much there, I think. Now I was going to glue this in, but I suspect I won't need to. I don't think that's going to go anywhere actually. I can put some in when I come to do it, or I can just wick some super glue around the edges, but that is fine, pretty tight in the middle, and if I knock it right through, the spacer that I've got, the bush, will also just nicely fit in there, so I can now use the circle jig on this. Just going to put the very lightest round over on the edge, just to take all the bits and pieces off, just with a guided bit, that's all. Just going to run some of this very thin runny super glue into the crack between the centre and the actual bearing outer race. Right, so the wheel is now pretty much flat. I've just run the sander over it. And I'm just going to put some white undercoat on it, or primer, just to get it sealed up and to give me a clue as to where I'm going to need a bit of filling doing. There's a join all the way across it in the ply that may well need a bit of filler, and several of the little knots have dropped out, so I'm just going to just give it a coat of white, and we'll see where we go from there. Once we've got that on, we should be able to see far easier what is acceptable as a finish and what isn't. There's a bit of a knock there it's had, things like that you can start to see far better when you've got a uniform coat on it of something. Okay, so I've got it covered in white emulsion, well, sealer coat. Just going to get a little bit of filler on it, just using car body filler because it dries quickly and it's sufficiently easy to sand that it makes it a sensible option. I've never got on very well with wood fillers. It's not rocket science, and it's not anything that needs a huge amount of care, but it just produces a slightly better finish, just filling most of the holes and inaccuracies in the level of the plywood, because it's relatively cheap plywood, so that when we come to give it a second and third coat it'll be reasonable finish on it. Right, so I've just wiped yesterday's memory card by accident, so I'm clearly not fully over my COVID yet and doing stupid things. So I best just recap where we've got to with this. I gave it a sand down from the previous filling, a couple of still small holes which have been brought back up to the surface again now, and I've given it another coat of white, so that is pretty much there now. That's flat and ready to go. What I did yesterday was to make a very crude and simple CLS bolted together with big bolts, T-shaped carrier to carry the thing. I've cut a shaft and glued that into the top. At the moment there's a bearing on there. These are just to space it to the right sort of distance at the moment, and hopefully now the wheel will go on. I will then get a split pin like that which will just hold it all together, and then that gives them what they need. I'm a little bit concerned that the wheel runs slightly out because of the fact that it's a very thin bit of ply, really, more than anything. I might try and stick a backing on it that will put another bearing in it just to make it a bit more rigid. Okay, so I've got it running a bit more accurately. I've stuck a plywood disc on the back with another bearing in, and what that enables me to do, I've got 3 fixings through to the front wheel, and by just sticking very small wedges in various places you can get it to run pretty much true. So that's okay now. That's solved that one. Now it's time to build the up and over little mechanism to get this whole thing. I've got a bit further on with this now. I mean, the logical thing would have been to have brought this whole CLS piece right the way up to the top to form the bracket, but the truth of the matter was that I hadn't got enough material, so we've had to make the own mend. I've put a threaded rod into the top of the CLS, threaded the actual CLS itself, so it's now got an 8mm rod in there. I may or may not glue that in. What it means is the whole thing will collapse down smaller if we are able to take it out, so I don't know. I've put a pair of bolts on top, nuts on top, made a cross piece and a piece on the top with a 6mm threaded hole to take a bolt which will take the actual, whatever it is, the method we choose to do, to actually run on the pins that stick through the board, and that again is adjustable for height, so that we can move it up and down to suit wherever the pins are. So that leaves me 2 problems now, or 2 things to deal with. That is what to use for pins and what to use for the actual plastic or rubber or whatever flap that will slow the wheel down. Other than that, I think I'm pretty much there. It'll need another coat of white on the front. My original thoughts were that I would paint all the sectors in, but apparently they want it left white so they can deal with it, so that's not a problem. Bit less work, and then we need to just paint the framework up as well. But at the moment I'll just go hunting in the bits box, or bits boxes down below, and see quite what I've got that'll do as a pin to be the markers all the way around the edge. Now it looks like, as ever, the box of IKEA bits that I've always got available is coming to the rescue. My initial thought was that some of the pins might be ideal, but they're not long enough. But I've got the studs that they use to attach furniture together, and that screws in very nicely into the plywood and gives a really good solid peg that can be taken out if needed, and I've got a whole load of those. So all I'm going to do now is just mark out the segments on the outer perimeter of the wheel and start and drill a few holes. Okay, and nearly there now. Just balanced the wheel. One of the problems I got was that it was permanently going down to the bottom in one spot, and even if you had something on the pegs on the front to sort of restrict movement, it was still pushing past them until it got to its bottom point. I've used some car wheel weights that I've used for model railway weighting things down, and I've balanced that wheel now, bearing in mind it's on a bearing at the moment, and pretty much anywhere I put it now it will stay. So I'm fairly happy that'll now give a sort of unbiased result wherever it lands. What I've also got now is a piece of thin plastic tube like fuel pipe. I've cut it down so that it's just a thin flap and screwed it on the end of that. So there's a degree of adjustability in all of this, in that the bracket itself it's got a degree of up and down movement, as has the bolt. I can slacken that off and move it up a bit. Let's just take it up a fraction, I think. Yeah. Right, so there we have it. I've painted the base and T-piece at the back black. I've painted this white, that it just leaves the lines showing through where the segments are, the 10-degree segments, so that the people that are going to do it however they want it done and divided up however they want it done have got lines that they can work to for it. But it's fairly random now and as accurate as I can make it, so hopefully it will get many years of use at fetes and things like that, school affairs, things like that, PTA meetings, things. So I hope the video was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be doing something different, I hope. I'll see you then. Bye!